Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's
Christopher
mine.
in Missouri, are you there?
Hey.
Hey, hi.
Hey, Russell. Hey, Jen. How are you guys?
All
Pretty
right.
good. How are you?
Good. So basically, I just called in today to ask about near-death experiences a little bit. It's a topic that fascinates me. I was just wondering what you guys thought about it.
Well, what do you think about it?
Well, basically, what I think about it is it seems like a lot of people are having very similar experiences, and it's kind of interesting, like, to read about the degree of overlap and similarities between different experiences.
Well, what do you mean by similarities in experiences?
Yeah, like, okay, so I pulled up, like one of the chief websites about it. Like, a lot of people see tunnels, people talk about telepathy, life reviews, all these different topics, and, like, when you read through the near-death experiences, like, a lot of people have these very similar experiences, and I guess what I'm thinking about is, I try to think, like, what are the possible explanations? Well, one, it could be our brains. Two, it could be conspiracy theory, like a conspiracy. Or three...
I think I can say straight up, we're not going to take the conspiracy approach.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so we can eliminate the conspiracy. That's good.
Can I suggest something, though, about people who have shared experiences?
Yeah, sure.
I think that, in one case, like you brought up that it could be our brains, which is kind of vague, but there are, ways that people describe things like, a light at the end of a tunnel that can be chalked up to certain firings of your neurons.
Right.
Basically affecting your perception of vision in different ways. And another way that you didn't touch on yet, maybe you were going to, is cultural. And taking this outside the realm of not necessarily talking about religious experiences, but a lot of people say that they have experienced alien abductions, for instance.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you feel about that, but these alien abductions didn't seem to start happening with any consistency until sometime in the middle of the 20th century, when aliens and spaceships had already entered the popular culture because, like, science fiction had popularized them. And then, like, people started gelling around a particular kind of experience, which, they didn't necessarily make up on purpose as a conspiracy, but maybe they had heard other stories about aliens, and they were able to contextualize that in their minds by saying, oh yeah, this is just like that guy I read about who also got abducted by aliens. And so when people talk about having similar experiences, you have to watch out for people. Even if they're not consciously lying, they may be unconsciously influenced by things that they have heard or think they understand already. So that's just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and I understand that point. It does seem to jive with a lot of the stories I read where people say, I never heard of near-death experiences, and, some people say, like, they're actually afraid to tell stories to other people because they're afraid of being judged, afraid of being labeled, and then they don't actually come out and talk about their experience until much later in time when they start to read about other near-death experiences. And then they say, oh, well, I can't be that crazy if, these other people have had, the same experiences I had. And one other point I wanted to make was, you guys said how, it's, your brain can produce, like, visuals and hallucinations, and I know about that. I took classes in neuroscience, but the one thing about near-death experiences that always, like, interests me a lot is the fact that a lot of people come back with very specific pieces of information, such as phrases that they hear from God, where God says the meaning of life is to learn how to love, or life is like a school, and I don't know. I just don't have a real great reason, like, how all of our brains could, like, have these same phrases ingrained in them.
Right. I mean, pardon me for saying so, but like God has these apparently rare opportunities to communicate directly with people and give them special messages, and he can't think of anything better to say than the secret is to love. I mean, could he come up with something more specific, like, hey, you could end world hunger if you use this unlimited energy device that I'll give you the plans for right now?
Yeah.
I mean, something people couldn't actually come up with on their own.
What? Okay. I don't really understand your point. You're saying, so why didn't God come up with a better thing to say? But what if, like, that actually is just the meaning of life?
Well, are you familiar with the term deepity?
Sorry, what?
Are you familiar with the term deepity?
Deepity?
Deepity, as in, it sounds deep, but it's really not.
Sure. I'm not familiar with the term now.
Okay. So it's a term that was coined by Daniel Dennett, and he's basically saying that this is a term that basically, to whatever extent it's true, it's kind of trivial, and to whatever extent that it's not trivial, it's likely not true.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite examples was in the movie Mystery Men, where there's this wise old sage character, and he's like, remember, unless you learn to master your rage. And then Ben Stiller goes, your rage is going to be your master. That's what you were going to say, right? Because you just take the first part of the sentence and reverse it.
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes things sound very deep and wise, but are just things that anybody could think of if they can.
Well, okay. But I guess my point is just, like I said, I can't think of a reason why multiple people would, unless it's a conspiracy, unless they're like reading other people's stories and just saying, okay, I'm just going to lie about this.
No, I mean, they probably are reading other people's stories. Because if they've had this experience and they're as fascinated by this NDE phenomenon as you are, they've probably sought out information about this. They've read other people's stories, and just because they've incorporated maybe some elements of other people's stories into their own, it doesn't mean that's a conspiracy. I mean, okay,
fine, but like I said, I mean, I don't know how many stories you guys have read. I've read a lot because I actually had something similar to an near-death experience happen to me.
Okay.
So I've read a lot about it, probably more than you guys have. I'm not saying you haven't, but I'm just saying I have read a lot.
Okay.
And the more of it you read, it's just like it's just hard for me to imagine that that's actually what's going on here. Although I do admit I don't have proof of that. I guess they could all be doing that, but yeah. So,
well, I mean, let's think of it in another context, because you talked about, it could be something to do with your brain. And most people who are involved in some kind of near-death experience, it's usually the result of some kind of, trauma, or maybe something, happened during surgery, and, I guess one of the common themes is that their brain was deprived of oxygen for a period of time, either because their heart failed, or they lost a lot of blood, or something happened. Okay. Do you know what happens to your brain when it doesn't get oxygen?
Yep.
Okay. So
it starts to die, and you do release chemicals that produce experiences that could be described as similar to NDEs. Blanking on the name of the one chemical that everyone says, but
I mean, the exact chemical is not even important. It's the fact that a brain deprived of oxygen, it starts kind of misfiring, and one of the things that happens is that if you're conscious while this happens, typically you start to get what they call tunnel vision. So you will see a light at the end of a tunnel because basically your peripheral vision starts to shut down.
Yeah, so that's true. There was I don't know if you guys know this particular experience. I think his name was Dr. Eben Alexander, who basically had a meningitis. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that experience is true, then that would kind of poke holes in that theory, because the part of his brain, responsible for producing hallucinations, producing visions like was completely destroyed by the bacteria. But I don't know. I just know that when I had an experience, it was my brain actually wasn't damaged at all. I actually called in a couple weeks ago, talked about it, but I really, it wasn't. I don't think it was a hallucination. It was too real, and I just I don't know.
So how would you define?
I know what I believe, but I can't convince other people of it because they didn't see it themselves. So all I can do is try to talk to people about it, and I don't know.
So you said that it was too real, but how would you? I mean, if you're having a hallucination, one of the things that people report during hallucinations is that it seems very real to them. So how do you determine that yours was something too real to have been a hallucination?
I mean, I wasn't on any drugs or anything, so there was no explicit cause for it. So if it was a hallucination, that means that your brain can just hallucinate at any time, at any place, and you would have no idea that what you're experiencing is reality versus hallucination. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
For a lot of people, very vivid imaginary scenarios play out in their minds every night when they go to sleep. I mean, it's not just drugs. There are a lot of different situations that can cause your brain to present you with weird situations that aren't real.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm pretty sure it was real, but I can't prove it, unfortunately. That reminded me of another point I wanted to make. Okay, so sometimes when I talked to Matt, actually, he said that, if for near-death experiences, well, they did studies, and the studies came out negative, and he was using that as proof that near-death experiences weren't real. But the thing is, okay, so if near-death experiences are real, okay, now I'm not saying that proves that God's real, but it at least points in that direction.
Why?
Couldn't God just make the test fail? I mean, he's in control of everything, right? If he exists. So he could just make the test fail.
And he would do this because, wait, let's think about this, okay?
I can tell you why.
So you're claiming that this being exists, that you call God, and it wants us to believe it exists, and it supposedly wants some kind of relationship with us. But it would deliberately
sabotage.
But it would deliberately sabotage a test designed to demonstrate that something that gives certain people access to it is not real. How does that make any sense?
Well, I guess because in the Bible it says, thou shalt not put God to the test, so he doesn't want us to know for fact
but this is, but there were, according to the Bible, there were plenty of people who had direct contact with God and could attest to that.
Thomas not believe until Jesus saw him, and then Jesus made a big point about how it's better not to believe and everything, or better not to see, better to just believe on faith.
And
that is a very convenient excuse for religion not to have to demonstrate anything, which is great not only for Christianity, but for all kinds of New Age hucksters who don't want you to look too deeply into why they're magical herbs don't actually do anything.
I admit, I don't know the mind of God and why he's the way he is, but I did have a dream one time where...
Well, when you do know the mind of God, maybe call back.
And by the way, even Alexander, this guy he talked about, there's a lot of criticism of that account.
I think some on our own blog back in the mists of time. Somewhere.
Yeah, something about that. And basically there was a 2013 investigation into his story and his medical background. And it turns out that before he published that Proof of Heaven book that supposedly recounted this near-death experience, he'd been terminated or suspended from multiple hospital positions and had been the subject of several malpractice lawsuits, including at least 2 involving the alteration of medical records to cover up a medical error. So this is the credibility.
Medicine will go to any lengths to stop people from finding out the truth.
I know. So, little tidbit on the credibility of this guy that you're using as your primary source for this or whatever.